All right, so this is what I tell my kids regarding breaking the laws, breaking the rules. This goes for anytime you step out of line. I'm going to explain it in the context of like police brutality, but it can apply to when you disrespect a woman. It can apply to when you're playing basketball and you get frustrated and you get too aggressive with somebody. This is what I tell my kids. In this world, you can only control yourself. There are things that are going to happen that's outside of your control. There are things that people are going to do to you that you can't control, like you become a victim, because truth be told, there are evil people in the world and things happen. There are evil cops in the world, right? So I tell them, if you're going to break the rules, if it's okay for you to just do whatever you want, whatever that may be, then it's okay for other people to just do whatever they want too. You can't just do whatever you want and then tell someone else, no. You got to stay within the confines of the law or morality or righteousness or whatever. You can't do that. You can't do that. If you have that right, they have that right. Now, how this pertains to police is it starts with yourself. Before any police ever show up or anything, it starts with yourself. If you're going to do things that is going to increase the likelihood of you having to deal with some police officers, then you have to accept the consequences. If you're committing a crime, there's a chance that you're going to have to deal with the police and the whole justice system, really. That doesn't mean that because you commit a crime that cops can just shoot you. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, as a person who's making a decision in that moment to do something that's going to put you in a worse situation, as a man, because I got two boys, I said, as a man, you have to deal with whatever comes after that. And like I said, the same thing can apply for basketball. If you get mad at somebody, or you're frustrated at whatever, and somebody go up for a layup and you slam them to the ground, or you do something that's out of line and you risk injuring them, you got to deal with whatever comes after. Does that mean that they can go get a axe and chop your head off and that's okay? No, it doesn't mean that. But what it means is when you step out of line, there are consequences, and you have to be willing to face those consequences. If you're not willing to face those consequences, whatever they are, then don't step out of line. Because you can't control someone else's anger. You can't control how far out of line someone else goes. So you do your best to control yourself. And nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And then, of course, when it comes to cops, not every encounter is because a person is committing a crime. Sometimes the cops are a-holes. Sometimes the cops are just doing like a routine stop or just doing their job, and they happen to come across you. So, but at the very, very beginning of the way you live your life is that you follow the rules and you take the consequences if you choose not to follow the rules. Now, like I tell them, I say, you don't know how the cops are going to be, right? You don't know if they're a good cop or bad cop. So if you resist them, and see, resisting an officer doesn't mean you're fighting them. It doesn't mean you're pushing them. It doesn't mean you're running away. Resisting a cop means you're not doing what they tell you to do. If they tell you to put your arms behind your back and you don't do it, you're resisting them. That may not seem like it to you, but that's really what it is. And they have protocols that require them to escalate. Eventually, it's going to escalate into forcing you to put your hands behind your back. That's how the law works. That's how police work. So it's when you're not complying, then you're resisting. You may say you have a right to based under certain circumstances or whatever. Okay, fine. If you believe that, then make sure you're right. But here's the thing. If that cop is a racist cop that kills people and gets away with it like you think, what's better for you to do? So it may be your right. It may be your right to refuse to put out your cigarette because you have an a-hole cop harassing you after he stops you for no reason. It may be your right to do that. But at the end of the day, is that the battle that needs to be fought? You got to pick your battles. Even when you're right, at times you got to pick your battles because it may not be the best situation for you. Right? Doesn't mean that somebody automatically has the right to kill you. But what it does mean is you have a level of control over how things go. And it's up to you to exercise what you can control because you can't control the actions of others. That's just common sense. If you can diffuse the situation, be humble and do it. If not, if you want to puff your chest out and demand your rights or whatever, then you have to accept the possibility that the other person is not going to respond properly. And again, we're talking about the context of the police. And if the idea is that the police are racist and they kill people and they get away with it on a daily basis, and they love having reasons to kill black people, then why would you even resist in that situation? Just do what they tell you. Do what they tell you. So I say, look, suppose you deal with a cop, you do something. I said, suppose you do something, or whatever, for whatever reason, you're involved with a cop. This is actually what I tell them, literally what I tell them. I say you get in a situation with the cop, and that cop's not a good cop, but it's only him and him there, or it's only you and the two police officers, him and his partner, and they do something bad to you. I said, who do you think the other cop who's not involved, who do you think he's going to side with? And both my kids, they're not stupid. They said they're going to side with the other cop. I said, so now if you're in a situation where you get whatever kind of dispute with the cop, now you have, even if it's just the one cop, I said, if it's a cop versus you, who do you think that when you go to court, who are they going to believe? They said they're going to believe the cop. I said, now, what if you did something really bad in the past, but now you're a nice person and you're trying your best to be like a good father and you're going to work and everything, and then something happens between you and a cop? Who are they? And then when they go to court, they see that you did bad things in the past. I said, what's going to happen? They said they're going to believe that you were the you were the wrong one. Does that make it right? That's not right. That's not right, because just because you have a record doesn't automatically mean that you did something else wrong at a totally different time. But see, this is why I focus so much on what you can control, because there are injustices in this world. There are racist people. There are all kind of stuff, classist people. There are all kind of things that are wrong in this world. And there are things that you can't change. Some things we can change. But then there are things that you can change, but they're so difficult to change that you're better off taking control over what you can control, rather than focusing on the things that you can't control. And I also pointed out to him, I said, this is what they do. I said, if you killed somebody before, or if they think you killed somebody before, let's say you were charged with it and you didn't do it, and charges were dropped or whatever. I said, if you're in a situation before and they think that, for whatever reason, you're a suspect, and they see that you were accused of killing somebody else before, they're going to try to make it seem like you did it. They're going to be convinced that you did it. My kids now, they're 13 and 9. I tell them that. This is what I tell them. See, a lot of people think that, because I challenge black people to be accountable for their actions, because I don't focus on racism and things like that, that I believe that they don't exist. They do exist. That's all the more reason to focus on what you can control. And I'm not talking about walking around scared every time you see a cop, or walking around, just being a punk to white people or anything like that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you need to be wise in every situation that you go through. And you definitely can't automatically assume negative motives and apply them to other people, because that will force you to act in a way that's detrimental to yourself. So that's why I talk about using a level head, being unbiased, controlling yourself. That's why I focus on that, because I understand the realities of the injustices that are out there. We may disagree on the level of the injustice. I don't think that every cop that shoots a black person automatically is an injustice, because it's not. But at the same time, I know that they exist. And because I know that they exist, I have common sense. If I'm pulled over by a police officer, I'm just going to give him whatever he wants. I've got pulled over for stupid stuff like, your tent. My tent's 50%. Look at my windows are up. My windows are up. Look how light my tent is. I've got pulled over for your tent's too dark more than once. And what I've learned is that that's kind of a default thing that apparently they're told to tell you to kind of give a justification why they're pulling you over. So what is it best for me? Like one time I was out in the suburbs, and the reason why I say that is, the laws are different. They seem to be more stricter or whatever about stupid stuff. I'm out in the suburbs driving at night, and the cop pulls me over. There's no one else on the road because I'm coming home from work. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm coming home from work. He asked me where you're going or where you coming from or whatever. Then he checked my papers, and then he talked about the tent. Now, I could have argued with him. Like, yo, I ain't doing nothing. I could have argued with him. I ain't doing nothing wrong. Why are you harassing me? It's because I'm black, because I got this nice car. Whatever it may be. Is that the best thing for me in that situation? Do I have the right to express my opinion? Yes, I do. Do I have a right to express the idea that I feel like that I'm being harassed? You do. Is that the best thing for you? Because if you do that, then you have to accept the consequences. That doesn't mean that if you do that and a cop punches you in the face that he's right. That doesn't mean that he's right to do that. But what I'm saying is you have control over a situation and you choose to make it go one way versus the other. So you have to take accountability for your part. Not for the part of the evil that may be done to you afterwards, but you have to own yours. And I don't see people owning theirs. When I see people talk about police shootings, they don't challenge the person, the suspect, the victim, whoever. They never challenge him. Why were you running from the police with a gun in your pocket? Why were you doing? They don't do that. And that's what bothers me. So I bring it out. You got to be consistent. You got to be consistent. And you wonder why things never change because you're not consistent. So I told him, I said, even if you did do something, I told my kids, if you steal from somewhere, or let's use the murder analogy because we know this happens. I said, if you were to kill somebody and it was an accident or something, or if you were to kill somebody and there was somebody else last week that was killed the same way, they're going to try to make it seem like you did it so that it can make the family of the people, of the person who was killed, so it can make their family feel better. Like, hey, we found the guy. It'll try to make the cops look better, like they did a good job and they stopped somebody. So I'm like, you don't know what kind of officer you're going to deal with. And then if you get into it with an officer, you don't know, if you go to court, you don't know if you don't know if the judge is going to be biased or racist. You don't know the same thing about the cop. You don't know if that judge is having a terrible day and he's just being an a-hole. You don't know if you're on trial, you don't know if any jurors are mad because they got to be a juror. And then they're just gonna vote you guilty, or they're just mad at you. Don't know what kind of prejudices and presuppositions that people have. You can't control them, so you control yourself. That's what I tell my kids, and I say all through the system. I said when you go to court, I said maybe you did something wrong, maybe you didn't, but you don't know if the people that on the other side of that are going to treat you properly and judge you fairly. You don't. And I said, so it's like, and then it's like, well, let's say you go to jail. Let's say all of that happens to you and you go to jail. And I explained to him, I said, so let's say you go to jail and this terrible thing happened to you. So you're upset, but you got a life you want to live. You're trying to get back out and you're trying to live your life. And you got people messing with you. You got people starting fights with you. And who knows what that, I never really been locked up. So I'm not trying to act like I know what it's like. I'm the first to tell you I don't. But my whole point is, again, you're in a situation where you have no control over the other people around you. And I said, so suppose when it's time for you to get out, let's say, that they're kids. So I don't know if I really said probation or parole, but I'm just like, when it's time for you to get out and they look at your history, they look at like, well, hey, you've been locked up for 3 years, and in 3 years you got into 6 fights. You did this, you did that, you did this. And I said, they don't know you. I said, these people don't know you. They don't know if you're just a really decent person who's a hardworking person who is trying their best to follow the rules. Or they don't know if you're a criminal who's just like starting trouble. People, I said, they don't judge you by how you are. But because they're kids, they kind of feel like, well, I'm a good person so that the police would understand, or that the courts would understand, or that this stranger who I'm having an altercation with, they would understand. I said, people they don't judge you by that. When you get into the system, they know you by what's on that paper. All they know you is by your actions. This guy did this, or this guy was accused of doing this. They don't know you as a person. So you're not going to get the benefit that you would get if there was somebody that, like your grandmom or the guy that grew up with you down the street who knows your heart on the inside. Like, you're not going to get that. So I understand that the system is not fair. I understand that generally speaking, every case that happens that people holler about is not some kind of injustice. But because we're talking about human beings who have the freedom to make choices, good or bad, you have people in those positions who make choices that are good or bad, that are biased, that are bigoted, that are corrupt, that are just spiteful. You have people in different positions that do that. You know, you can't control that. So again, what I tell them is, and I literally went through that whole line of progression, like from you being involved with a cop or you being involved with somebody and the cop's coming, and then how you conduct yourself with a cop, whether the cop is wronging you or not. So it's like at the end of the day, with all of the things out there, especially those who feel the most strongly about what's going on with police and people that get pulled over and that sort of thing, with all the people who feel super, super strongly about it, like, yo, this is a war, this is genocide or whatever, that's all the more reason to control yourself. And you may look at that like a sign of weakness, like, oh, he's a coward, he ain't ready for it or whatever. It's not about being a coward, it's about having common sense. Some things, these people, if you're protesting, if your biggest issue is black people that were killed by the cops and they resisted, or let's say they, in your eyes, they didn't resist, but the only reason why they're in that situation is because they were committing a crime or something. Now, there are the small percentage, but there are people who really didn't do anything wrong and they're being provoked by a racist cop, by a corrupt cop, whatever. You have that, and those you have to fight for you have to fight for justice for them. But when you take people that had at point A, point B, point C, point D, point E, where you have people that have all these different times when they could have diffused the situation themselves, and it turns out badly for them, and you don't acknowledge that, it's like crying wolf, because other people see it, especially people who understand police protocol and that sort of thing, and especially people who just have common sense. It's just like you're going to turn on deaf ears and you ruin it for that small percentage of people who literally did nothing. And like the guy that, you know, like if you get pulled over and you say something the cop don't like and you're just sitting in your car and he just punched you. Or I saw a video, and I saw a video where a guy was pulled over and he was talking to the cop like, well, hey, I'm a detective. I'm in, why are you asking me why I'm in this nice neighborhood? I'm just working. And the guy had a calm voice and everything. And the cop was terrified for some reason. And the cop pulled out his gun and aimed it at his face. This guy didn't move. He's sitting still just like I am. He didn't move. He didn't reach. He literally did nothing. And this cop was so shaken up and so scared that when backup finally came, the other officer when the officer came and told him to put the gun down, he wouldn't do it. He's shaking. You can see his hand shaking, holding the gun. I don't know. He was terrified. So you have cases like that. Now, he could have shot that guy and then, it would have been a big case. It would have been a big thing. But when you cry wolf for every criminal or every person who willingly puts themselves in a bad situation, you make it worse for the people who did nothing, and they need you to advocate for them because an injustice has been done. All right, that's a bit of a tangent, but the bottom line of what I tell my kids is that there are evil people out there. There are racist people out there. There are people that are corrupt, and you don't know what you're going to deal with in any situation. And that's why I say this applies to basketball. This applies to disrespecting a woman. You can say something wrong to a woman because she said something wrong to you, or you can say something wrong to some dude and he get mad and go in the house and get a gun and come out and shoot you. Does that mean that you be a coward and you just like be bullied? I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, and it's weird because the Bible actually talks about this. It's like the person who goes out of their way to diffuse situations is the more mature person. And that ain't easy. That's not easy to do, especially when you see other stuff happening and you're like, that ain't going to be me. Or if you see a person doing something to other people and you're like, that ain't going to be me. But at the end of the day, what's the bottom line? The bottom line is you got a life to live. You got a family. You got friends. You have things you want to do. You know what I mean? A lot of people depend on you. A lot of people love you. You can't just think about what's going to make you feel better because of your pride or whatever. Some of the stuff don't really change anything. If Sandra Bland had put out her cigarette, would that have changed anything? Like, would that have made her a coward? Would that have made her a lesser person? And you may say, well, she didn't have to. Yeah, you're right. She didn't have to. If that was her right to keep smoking, then that was her right to keep smoking. But the whole thing is, with her being a person who has a history of recognizing the police as hostile killers or violent or racist or whatever, the most wisest thing for her to do in that situation would have been to comply with the officer, deal with his bogus ticket, and then you drive off. You have a tantrum in your car, or you call your friend, and you whatever. But at the end of the day, like, if you're making the situation worse? It's really pointless to exercise your rights. So I don't know why she died. I don't necessarily believe that they killed her. I don't know. But my whole point is that could have been avoided because you don't know what's on the other side. That could have been avoided by her taking action. Alton Sterling, you're a convicted felon with a gun. You're a convicted felon with a gun, and somebody was out there waving a gun at the cops. The cops show up. Is it in your best interest to say, what am I doing? I didn't do anything wrong, knowing that you have a gun on your person and you're a felon, and to resist them? Now, again, resisting isn't he didn't fight the cops. To me, he showed no, from what I saw in the video, up until the point where he got on the ground where you couldn't see anything. But from what I saw in the video, he showed no aggression towards them, but he did resist them. He made it difficult for them. Either that or he was just so big and they were trying to move him and they thought he was. But they responded as though he was resisting them. The most reasonable thing to do, especially if you're a convicted felon with a gun, if you're quote unquote really not doing anything wrong, is to comply. But you have to be willing to face the other side of the story. Maybe he wasn't just quote unquote not doing anything. He's a convicted felon with a gun, with a rap sheet longer than, I don't know, his rap sheet longer than all last year. Like, you can't act like everybody that runs into the cops is a saint, and that they were these great people that were just doing nothing. Like y'all like to say, they were doing nothing. Stephon Clark was running through people's backyard. He was busting people's windows. Now, it's funny because you can theoretically, or you can't really say necessarily it was him, because I didn't see him do it, and he was just accused of doing it, right? But when they showed the chopper footage, there's nobody else in that area. It's pitch black at night. He's the only one there, and he's running through people's yards. He's running from the direction that the 911 call came, where the so-called witness saw him, and he's running through people's yards, trying to get away, trying to get home. So that's the context of when he was shot. Then when the police saw him, he ran for whatever reason. Maybe you could say he didn't know he was the cops. You could say he just didn't trust the cops, whatever. But he ran. And he put himself in a situation that pitch black. He put himself in a situation where he's running from the cops in almost pitch black nighttime. They barely could see him. And he runs home. And then for whatever reason, he turns back towards him. Maybe he decided it's best for me to give up. I'm right outside my mom's house. My grandma's house. I'm just going to give. For whatever reason, he turned back towards him. So if you're a cop and you're chasing someone and they're running around houses and stuff, and then they turn back towards you and they have something in their hand, anything, what are you going to think? Are you going to think that, it might be a cell phone, regardless of the color? Or are you going to be just running off adrenaline, and you're going to be thinking the person that I was chasing turned back towards me with something in their hand? Does that automatically mean they were justified in shooting them? Absolutely not. But this could have been avoided had that young man not been running through people's property. Let's assume that he wasn't busting people's car windows and breaking into people's cars. Assuming that he was not doing any of that. All of this could have been avoided had he been walking down the street, going to his mom's house like he was supposed to, instead of trespassing, running through people's yard, running from yard to yard, running through people's property. So again, That doesn't mean that has nothing like that doesn't mean that he deserved to be shot or they should have shot him or great for them for doing a justice. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you control what you can control. And if you make decisions that's going to increase the likelihood of you dealing with police brutality, then you have to own some of it. Not all of it. You have to own some of it. And that's what I tell my kids.